Sadie Thayer. I'm the director here, and it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's presenter, John Lundin. So John is a Seattle lawyer who learned to ski on Snoqualmie Pass using wooden skis, leather boots, and cable bindings, and riding rope tows. He was a member of the Sahali Ski Club, which began on Snoqualmie Pass in 1931, and has homes in Seattle and Sun Valley, Idaho. His mother, Margaret Odell Lundin, learned to ski on Mount Rainier and Snoqualmie Pass in the 1930s, was faculty advisor to Seattle's Queen Anne High School Ski Club from 1938 to 1941, and took her students by ski train to the Milwaukee Ski Bowl at Hyak for free ski lessons courtesy of the Seattle Times. John has written extensively about early skiing in Washington and the history of the Wood River Valley in Idaho, where his great-grandparents settled in 1881. He is a frequent lecturer on history topics in both states and is currently writing several other history books. Join me in welcoming John Lundin.
Thank you, Sadie, and thank you all for coming. Thanks to the museum. If the people in back, I would suggest you might want to move up a little bit. The slides will be a little easier to see. Just a suggestion. I promise I won't call on you if you sit in front. In fact, if I have any questions, I'm going to start in the back. So be forewarned. Also, some of the I made this PowerPoint presentation self-explanatory because some places want to put it on the website. So don't worry about being able to read everything, all the words. I will summarize the important stuff for you. Before I start, I always like to get a sense of who the audience is. How many people here are skiers? And how many are here from the university, by the way, from Central? No one. How many people have skied on Snoqualmie Pass? Now we're going to get real personal. How many people skied in Snoqualmie Pass in the 1980s? 1970s? 1960s? 1950s? 1940s? Yeah, there's some of us who were there earlier. I have to say I gave this talk in Sun Valley, Idaho in January when the Ancient Skier organization was there. And that's a group of skiers who've been doing it forever from Sun Valley, Seattle, and Portland. And there are half a dozen people who held their hands up when I asked about skiing there in the 1930s. So there's some people around who have been doing it a long time. Before I get into the book, let me just tell you how I got into this. A couple of years ago, an old friend, Dave Moffett, asked if I would like to help organize the Washington State Ski and Snowboard Museum. Dave's an old friend. His family owned and operated all the Snoqualmie Pass ski areas from the 30s till the 70s. And there had been an effort to make a ski history museum for many, many years. And finally, Dave decided to be the organizer and do it. So we worked a couple of years and put together, I think, a really exciting series of exhibits. It's very small, so we don't have a lot of stuff, but it's highly digitized. We work with some cutting-edge consultants, so it really is kind of a high-tech museum. Has anyone been there, by the way? One. A couple.
I have something to donate for you, though.
Well, perfect. See me afterwards.
Okay.
Check out the website. Just Google Washington Ski Museum, and the website really gives you a pretty good idea of what's there. And because I'd skied my whole life, my mother had skied her whole life, I figured, well, I knew everything about ski history. I'll do some writing. And then I came across a picture of my mother at the Milwaukee Ski Bowl in 1939. And I'd never heard of the Milwaukee Ski Bowl. I thought, gosh, there's a lot I don't know. So I wrote a story about that, a paper. And then I was in Sun Valley a year later, and I met Sam and Claudette Nebo from Cle Elum. Some of you in the crowd I know them. talked about the Cle Elum Ski Club. I've heard of the Cle Elum Ski Club. So I realized that as long as I've been doing it, there's an awful lot about history I didn't know. And honestly, I probably didn't know 90% of what's in the book. As long as my family had skied, it was all new to me. I ended up writing a series of papers, 11, that have been published on historylink.org, which is the online encyclopedia of Washington history. And a couple of years ago, I was contacted by History Press, that's the publisher, and they found out about the papers and asked whether I'd put them together into a book, and which I was happy to do, and this is the result. They've actually recruited me to write another book on Sun Valley, which I'm in the process of doing now. Sun Valley, the early years under the Union Pacific. As most of you know, Sun Valley was started in 1936 by Union Pacific Railroad as a way to stimulate passenger traffic in the Depression. And it was the first destination ski area and really set the tone for what would come many, many years later. So that's how I got into it. Here's the book, some pictures. History Press, it's very professional. They do all the layout, they design the cover, they design how it looks, and I think they did really a terrific job. I was fortunate a month ago to learn that the book was given an award from the International Ski History Association as the Outstanding Regional Ski History Book of 2017. And I went to Squaw Valley to pick up the award, and that's what it is. They give it out once a year, and it's quite a prestigious thing. So I'm lucky in my first publishing effort to have it recognized. This is the ski museum of Snoqualmie Pass, at least a rendering of it. It's right in the pass. It's on the side where the ski area is, and it's in an industrial building in a new development there. Very small, but very high tech. And I'd urge you to stop there or at least check out the website. The picture is Phil Mayer and me. We had our 2-year anniversary last October. And Phil, both Mayer brothers, have been big supporters of the museum. In fact, one of the impressive things we have there is one of the Mayer's World Cup trophies. It's this big, it's huge, and very impressive. But there's everything about Washington ski history there. Talks about 9 Alpine resorts, 6 community ski areas, and 24 Nordic ski centers. A little blurb on each. Probably the center of it is our exhibit on Olympians. We have 39 Washington Olympians, and 15 of whom won Olympic medals. And we have replicas of their stuff. Some of the medals are up there. Film clips of the ones in the modern era where you actually see them win the medals. So we're excited. I think it's great. And by the way, all the profits from the book go to support the ski museum. So not only if you buy it, you'll get an interesting book. You help support the folks. I was surprised to find in the 30s and 40s, Washington skiing was perceived in the rest of the country as being the best in the United States, and there are a number of reasons for it. But national skiing was made here early on in the 30s and was recognized as the place to go. And here are just a few quotes. Washington is the Switzerland of America. Washington and the Pacific Northwest conceitedly have the greatest skiing in North America. It was at Snoqualmie Pass that modern skiing was born and raised. And those are just some of the few quotes that describe how it was perceived. There are 4 major themes that I learned, and it's reflected in the book. First, the influence of our Norwegian community. Our Norwegian immigrants started the sport of ski jumping and cross-country skiing. And at least through the 40s, that was by far the most popular form of winter recreation. Alpine skiing really didn't come in until the mid-30s, and then it was slow to catch on. Jumping was where it was at in those days. Second, the role of newspapers. The newspapers played a hugely formative role in the early days of skiing. Not only did they have extensive coverage of skiing matters, but they all formally participated in one way or another. And they had very erudite newspaper reporters that would cover the competitions and could really critique the form, the style, and write very interesting articles about them. But they all had a piece of the action, so to speak. The Seattle PI in 1934 started and promoted the Silver Skis race on Mount Rainier. The Seattle Times in 1938, when the Milwaukee Ski Bowl opened, offered free ski lessons to Seattle high school students. And in 1949, when the ski acres opened, the Seattle PI did the same thing. The third theme is the role of railroads in promoting skiing. They were instrumental, particularly in the 20s and 30s. That was almost the only way you could get to the ski areas. But they all saw this as a potential revenue, and they used ski tournaments in ski areas as a way to promote taking the train there. Over here you had the Northern Pacific that went over to Stampede Pass and was the primary access to the Cle Elum Ski Club tournaments. You had the Milwaukee Railroad, that was the primary access to Snoqualmie Pass and the tournaments there. And of course Great Northern that went over to Stevens Pass was the primary access to the Leavenworth tournaments. And they not only took people, but they advertised the sport and the tournaments substantially. The fourth theme, as you can see, was the impact of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal programs. The CCC, the WPA, and the Forest Service were instrumental in the 30s in developing ski areas, both here and nationally. They built roads into ski areas. They cleared forested areas so ski areas could be built, and they built shelters, warming huts. You know, they did it Snoqualmie Pass, Stevens Pass, Mount Rainier, Mount Baker, and Leavenworth. And the early ski industry couldn't have gotten along as well as it did without the support of the New Deal programs. I mentioned how extensively newspapers were involved. This is just one example of one day, Wednesday, February 22nd, 1939. And this is the Seattle Times, one page of the Seattle Times sports section. And there's 7 articles about skiing. And in the broadest sense, there's an article about Birger Ruud, a very famous Norwegian jumper who competed at Snoqualmie Pass in '38. A national ski jumping champion, Sigurd Uland, was going to compete that winter at the summit. A new American distance record was set in Michigan. And by the way, the drive to set new distance records was huge, and all those competitions were really followed throughout the country. A person won a cross-country race in Salt Lake City. There was a ski event in Poland that was covered, and the Ballard skiers were going to have the primary role in entertainment at the Ski Bowl, and then of course covering the ski conditions. I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I can remember a story about skiing in the Seattle Times all winter. And here on one day, on Wednesday, not even the weekend, you have 7 articles. And that's just typical of the role they played. Norwegians were everywhere along the northern tier. You can see some of the statistics. Between 1870 and 1910, 1.5 million Scandinavians came to the country, and a third of them were Norwegians. And most settled in the northern tier from New England, Midwest, to the Pacific Northwest. By 1930, 1.1 million people in the U.S. were born in Norway or had parents that were, and 47% of them lived in New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, or Seattle. So there was a huge group of Norwegians, most of whom had learned to ski jump in their country, and that was a form of recreation and entertainment and bonding that they brought with them. And they brought that whole dynamic to this country. When the Winter Olympics began in 1924, It was only Nordic events, jumping and cross country. Alpine didn't start until 1936, and it was perceived as a real latecomer. And jumping was so popular here, we had some of the biggest ski jumps in the country, indeed in the world. And all the famous jumpers from Europe and the United States came to compete here in the Pacific Northwest. And it started in the teens in Mount Rainier, and really took off in the 20s at Cle Elum, and then in the late 20s and 30s at Beaver Lake on Snoqualmie Pass and Leavenworth. Anyone ever remember watching Wide World of Sports?
Yes.
Recognize this picture?
Yeah, yes. Scary.
Yeah. Most people's, including mine, at least our generation, their perception of ski jumping came from this. And Wide World of Sports showed from the mid-60s to the mid-90s. And it was the most widely followed sports program. And they started out at the beginning talking about the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. And this poor Yugoslavian ski jumper in 1970 was the agony of defeat.
Yes.
And I couldn't get a live clip because it really is awful watching it. You just get a sense of what it was like. He was probably going 60 miles an hour at the bottom, and he fell and tumbled over the side and went down there. So I and many people probably in this room thought, those crazy Norwegians, how on earth can anyone do this? And that view was kind of pervasive in the people that didn't ski jump. I've got some quotes here. Seattle Times said, ski jumping is a breathtaking pastime of risking life and limb on skis. Warren Miller, the filmmaker and ski philosopher, said, jumping takes great courage or a low IQ. He also said the agony of climbing, the shakiness of the scaffolds built out of scrounged lumber, and the lack of safety bindings kept most people from ever becoming ski jumpers. They were smart people. On the other hand, you talk to the jumpers, and they're so casual about their sport, they don't see it as a big deal. Here's a quote from a Norwegian exchange student at the UW. He actually competed in the 60th Winter Olympics in Squaw Valley for Norway, but he was on the UW jumping team. Jorborn Yegseth. And he said, jumping's no big deal. It's like football. We started at 6 years old, and it's like playing football. And he said, no one's afraid. It's not really as dangerous as downhill skiing. You're only going about 60 miles an hour at top speed. As you follow the curve of the hill, you're never more than 20 feet high. And there are no trees to wrap yourself around. You land at 40 miles an hour. Some skiers land so gently, they don't even leave a mark in the snow. No big deal, right? That make you ready to go and give it a try?
No.
Birger Rode, the famous Norwegian jumper, said, here's from Kongsberg. And those who cannot learn to be a jumper must go to work. That's the law of Kongsberg. Kongsberg was the site of the largest iron mine in Norway. And there were only two options. Those who couldn't jump went to work underground in the iron mine, and the ones who could jump got on the international circuit and became professionals. The quote I love came from Peter Hugstead, who won the Olympic gold medal in '48. He was asked, which is tougher, winning the gold medal in Olympics or winning the Holmenkollen, which is the big national ski jump in Norway? He said it's not even close. In the Olympics, you only jump against 4 Norwegians. In the Holmenkollen, you jump against 50. Anyone know where ski jumping first started in this state? If you read the newspaper on the left, Queen Anne Hill, Seattle, February 1916. The year of the big snow. It collapsed half the roofs in Seattle. No one could get around. So the local Norwegians decided to have a jumping exhibition. So they literally took Queen Anne Avenue, which is the steepest, one of the steepest hills in Seattle, built a jump at the bottom and started at the top, and all the way down and went off. And thousands of people went to watch. And they were so fascinated, they said, we need to do more of this. So that got the local Norwegians to form clubs, and they held regular competitions after that. From 1917 to 1924, there were summer jumping competitions on Mount Rainier in Paradise Valley, and it attracted hundreds of people, and some of the best jumpers in the world would come to that. And that was said it was only the second place in the world after Finns in Norway where the finest skiing may be obtained in the summer months. Immensely popular. When they stopped, the cudgel was picked up by Cle Elum. And for all the Cle Elum history, I thank the Mabel family. Sam's mother was head of the North Kittitas County Historical Society, and she collected all of the memorabilia and pictures from one of the originators of the Cle Elum Ski Club. I had access to them, and he's since then donated them to Central Washington University. So if you want to see the originals, they're at the library over there. But the club started in 1921, and from 24 to 33, they had annual ski jumping tournaments, which in the late 20s and early 30s attracted some of the best, again, certainly in the Northwest and the West Coast, if not from all over the country. In 1931, they built this giant ski lift. Wow. The ski area was on the top of the ridge north of town, and it was a 2-mile hike from Cle Elum up there, up a steep precipice. And then you jumped down, this faces north, this is the Teanaway Valley in here. So all the ski jumpers and spectators had to hike 2 miles up the hill. And then the jumpers had to climb this and take several practice jumps off, and they'd end up way down in the Teanaway, have to hike back up and climb up again and do that. And of course the spectators had the same hike, and they'd be out there all day in the snow or rain. So these were really tough people. It wasn't like driving up to a place and watching something. You had to work for your money. And that's a picture of the lodge they built. Again, Northern Pacific provided most of the access from Ellensburg and Yakima, and also from the west, because Snoqualmie was not kept open until 31 in the wintertime. This shows in 29, jumping competition really expanded, because you had the Seattle Ski Club on Snoqualmie Pass, Leavenworth Ski Club, and the Cascade Ski Club from Portland that held tournaments on Mount Hood. And there's a circuit. And this is from 1932, but it shows the circuit. Leavenworth today, Cle Elum next week, Portland after that, ending up at Snoqualmie Pass. So the same people, both the jumpers and the spectators, would literally ride this circuit to watch the competition. This is Leavenworth. Leavenworth Winter Sports Club started in 29, and they had the advantage of being located very close to downtown Leavenworth, about 1.5 miles from downtown. As you can see here, unlike the huge tower that Cle Elum built, they used the natural terrain of the hillside. So you could, literally take a bus or drive there, walk up the side, 2-mile hike, and then they use the natural terrain of the hill. And these are actually some memorabilia. This shows how Great Northern was involved in promoting them. $475 round trip, which in the early 30s probably was a substantial amount of money. So you couldn't, it wasn't like a quarter or $475 now. It took some cash to be able to go and watch this. Seattle Ski Club formed on Snoqualmie Pass in 1929 by Norwegians. They built a jump on Beaver Lake. And again, that was about 1.5 miles in from the highway. This is I-90. This is the old Sunset Highway there that existed before the freeway was built. And Beaver Lake is up here. So the spectators and the skiers had to hike all the way up here to watch the competition. And again, they used the natural terrain of the hill. They looked and found a place that didn't really need much modification, just some thinning and grooming. And this is the in-run, and actually the out-run, you can't see it here, but it comes up. So the skiers would not even have to stop, they would just go uphill until they naturally stopped. The Seattle Times said the jump was the most violent pitch on the summit and had one of the steepest landings in the world. A hill 3 or 4 degrees steeper than the famous Holmenkollen lift jump in Norway. This was their lodge that they built in '31. And this gives you an idea of what Snoqualmie Pass looked like during one of the tournaments. This was 1934. And there were 100 people jumping. They tried to put a limit on the number of competitors, but there were so many qualified people, they had 100 people jumping, and there are 5,000 cars parked on the highway. Can you imagine that? And this is the main east-west highway over the Cascades. Can you imagine trying to get a truck through there in the middle of the tournament? And of course, the book goes into much more detail than we are now. It talks about the competition between individual jumpers in the 30s, and the jumpers were like professional football quarterbacks. Everyone knew their names, everyone followed their exploits. The newspapers reported when they're jumping in Iron Mountain, Michigan, or Vermont, or down in California. They really were well known and well publicized. Probably the biggest ski jumping event in the 30s was 1938 at Snoqualmie Summit. And 2 Norwegian brothers were doing a tour of the United States, Berger and Sigmund Ruud. The Ruud family dominated international ski jumping for a decade. Sigmund won a silver in '28 at the Olympics. Berger won a gold in '32 and again in '36. So they're well known. And they came and did a tour of the country. And the tour was so well known and well followed that it was the subject of a master's thesis at the University of Oslo about 10 years ago. And they went all over the country competing. In Chicago, they did an outdoor competition in their Coliseum, their outdoor stadium, and their 10,000 cars went there. And just before coming to Seattle, they did an exhibition in Los Angeles. It was watched by 100,000 people. And there were 4,000 or 5,000 people that watched them here. You could just get a sense of the crowd. This is an actual picture from the jump. And I told you about the natural curve. This was the takeoff here, and you can see how the outrun came up to slow them down. Although there's a famous quote that said, after Berger did an almost perfect jump, at the end he didn't just stop, he somersaulted. And you can imagine what that's like on 14-foot jumping skis, not going off a jump and doing a somersault, just coming down and doing one. They were extremely athletic folks. Again, just an example of the role that the railroads played. These are just some of the ads that you can see. Northern Pacific, excuse me, and Cle Elum. You can see the rates. That was only $1.50, so it's a lot cheaper to go to the Cle Elum meets than over in Leavenworth. And again, here's another Leavenworth ad, Northern Pacific.
The train on time this time.
Yeah. There's a story behind that.
I'm sure.
The prior year, there were 3 times as many people showed up at Union Station than they had room for. So it came in an hour and a half late, and they missed most of the jumping competition. So this year, they added additional trains, and that was their advertising. And the Milwaukee Railroad opened the Milwaukee Ski Bowl at Hyak in '38. And, you know, this talks about, there's only about 25 to go round trip, free lessons for high school students, and really first-rate facilities. And Northern Pacific in '39 wanted to get into the act, and they were going to do a major ski resort, Stampede Pass. And they ended up opening a small one called Martin Ski Dome that you could get to see Stampede Pass by Northern Pacific. 1914 is when Alpine skiing started on Snoqualmie Pass. That's when the Mountaineers opened their first lodge there. And the main access was by Milwaukee Road. And you got off west of the pass and you had a steep half-mile climb up there. And they started in the early 20s marking cross-country ski trails, doing rudimentary form of downhill skiing, and although it was really what we would know backcountry skiing. You know, they would go use it for climbing and then, you know, ski down. In 28, there were so many people using the lodge, they built a second lodge at Stampede Pass called Mini Ski Lodge, and that was available, that was accessible by train from Seattle and Tacoma, Northern Pacific. Here's where that was located. Here's I-90 now. Here's Stampede Pass, and Northern Pacific, when it was built in the 1880s, went through first over Stampede Pass and then built a tunnel under it. And Martin was the eastern portal of the tunnel under Stampede Pass. And that's where the mini ski hut was put in, and that's where Northern Pacific was considering a major ski area before the war.
Does the train still go through there? Is that?
It does. They haven't had passenger service since 1961. But that's still the main route of Burlington Northern Map, which is the successor to Great Northern and Northern Pacific and a few others. One of the things the Mountaineers did was they started called patrol races. And it was a 20-mile race from Snoqualmie Pass along the ridge of the Cascades to Mini Ski Hut here. Actually, that's first. This is Stampede Pass, there's Snoqualmie. And this was the longest and hardest race in the country. And you raced in 3-person teams, and you had to go together. You had to finish within 1 minute of each other. And it was just physically exhausting. They had to carry required equipment. It was based on military races they did in Europe. And they ran these from 1930 through World War II. And the Mountaineers, just the last couple of years, have resurrected the race. And they've done some interesting things. But this was seen as, again, the most physically demanding race in the country. Alpine skiing in the early 30s got a big boost from private ski clubs and families who actually built their own houses or lodges up on Snoqualmie Pass. There were no organized facilities in those days. Mountaineers started it, and my old ski club, Sahali, built this lodge in 32. But this is the map, not drawn to scale, by Harlan Eastwood. His son has published a book about this. And this shows the location and numbers of private houses in the 1930s on and near Snoqualmie Pass. There's the Summit ski area. This is the old highway. It's obviously been relocated with the freeway. And the road to Alpental would go in here. And Sahali Ski Club is here, and Washington Ski Club is there. This is called the old Yellowstone Highway, and there are 6 or 8 private houses there. And down here, here's Denny Creek, another 21 homes down there. And all these were between Denny Creek. There's still a road that you can drive, and this is, you know, just west of Snoqualmie Pass on the highway. But this was the core of alpine skiing in the 30s, where private homes, private people, and private ski clubs. And here are pictures of some of them. These are all from Snoqualmie Pass. There's a photographer named Ellis who has done a whole series of photographs of Snoqualmie Pass. And here just a bunch of cabins there. That shows you the kind of snow load they got back in the 30s. Haven't seen anything like that in decades. This was owned by some friends of mine. It was on the old Yellowstone Highway. And this was owned by Helen Bush School. A lot of the institutions put in lodges. Helen Bush did, Wash Athletic Club did. College Club had ski lifts up, or ski areas up there. Seattle Tennis Club considered building one in the middle 30s as well. This was one of the first. This was built in 1930 by 5 Seattle families who just decided that's how they wanted to spend their weekends. So this was the start of Alpine skiing. There was still all the ski jumping going on, but this was the beginning. Here's my little ski club. It was built in 32 on what's now the Alpine Road. It was architect designed, slept 40 people in the beginning, and they offered some of the first lessons on the pass. And one of the things you saw throughout the 30s is that the ski clubs would have competitions against each other, races almost every weekend. And they'd be covered by the Seattle Times and PI. You know, these are just people racing against each other, but there'd always be a big column, who won, who sponsored it, and so forth. That was just how they covered it. The Seattle Times said that by 33, there were 2,000 to 4,000 skiers at Snoqualmie Pass every weekend, and 10,000 skiers throughout the state. So all of a sudden you had this, even though it's the middle of the Depression, people didn't have money, something about this sport captured the imagination, and they're willing to, pool their money and drive up or take the trains up and engage in skiing on weekends. Slalom skiing first appeared in spring of 1933. They had the first race on Rainier. And in 34, they had the first sanctioned slalom race on the Snoqualmie Pass. And this was an innovative thing. No one knew about it. Seattle Times said that a race course is 1,000 feet long. The racers travel 2,000 feet before they finish. There are frequent and tremendous spills. And there were really no ski lessons there. So the Seattle Times decided they teach people. So they had Ben Thompson, who was a well-known local skier, write articles that were published in the Times, how to ski. And there are 7 of them published weekly. And this is just an example of one of the first ones here. Learn to ski, you don't need lessons, just read the newspaper. But of course, this is how they got up the hill. There weren't any lifts in those days. So it really was limited to the physically fit and aggressive people. And, there were a bunch of them here. Our Scandinavian immigrants, led the way, but it's not easy work in those days. In the middle 30s, there were a whole series of breakthroughs where alpine skiing became well known and started to be followed. The first was this. In January 34, the Seattle Park Department opened the first public ski area on Snoqualmie Pass. This later became the Snoqualmie Summit Ski Area. And it was operated as a Seattle Park, if you can imagine that, 60 miles away, 2 hours by road in those days. And it was a CCC project. In December of 33, the CCC set a crew team up, and they cut all those trees. It used to look like this a month before, and that was a ski area. It was all artificially cleared. And they built a warming hut. Again, this was one of the first real ski areas in the country that Roosevelt's programs built. And so few people skied that the park department gave free ski lessons in an ice arena in downtown Seattle. Lasted a week, but you didn't have to read the Times there. You could actually go and get instruction. And the park department operated that till 1940, when it was taken over by private operators, Moffats. Another thing that happened in 34 was what became a real iconic Northwest race, the Silver Skis race on Mount Rainier. And this was a really dangerous downhill race that started at Camp Muir at 10,000 feet and ended up at 5,500 feet at Paradise. And of course, how'd you get from there up there? Or down your toes, you got it, you walked. It's a 3-hour hike up there before you can ski down. And there were 1 or 2 control gates to keep people from going over cliffs, but otherwise you take your own route. You started and you finished. And in 34, they had what was called the Gomazel, which was the mass start. everyone lined up, they said go, and everyone went at the same time. And it was so chaotic. There were 69 who started, and probably a third of them were knocked out of the race the first 100 yards because they ran into each other. So they did individual starts after that. But, I mean, they went 4,800 feet in 3.2 miles at breakneck speed. And their race, this was actually initiated and sponsored by the Seattle PI. It was called the Kandahar of the Northwest and the Kentucky Derby of downhill skiing. And this really helped put Northwest skiing on the map. It was so exciting and so different. It was much like races similar to this they had in Europe, the Kandahar and some others, all the best skiers in the country wanted to come and compete here. Next thing that happened to put Northwest skiing on the map was in 1935. We had the National Downhill and Slalom Championships here on Mount Rainier that were also the tryouts for the 36 Olympic teams. And this was really the first big national ski race. It was held in Rainier, got a huge amount of publicity, and really helped, again, put Northwest skiing on the map. There are 59 male and female competitors came from all over the country. Dick Durrance from Dartmouth was by far the leading ski racer. He came. But as a result, 5 Northwest skiers, Washington State skiers, were selected for the Olympic team. Don Fraser, Derek Crooks, Grace Carter, and who are known as the Tacoma Ski Queens, the Smith sisters. So out of 14, we had 5 from the state of Washington. It's pretty remarkable. Again, helping to bring Northwest skiing and how good it is to the country. And it was widely publicized, as were the 36th Olympics. Then you get some ski lifts starting to show up, particularly in the East Coast. 34 was the first rope tow in this country. A few other Spaniard rope tows in New England. 35, Dartmouth put in the first J-bar. And these were publicized here. And, all the people that had to walk up and to ski down thought, gee, that sounds pretty good. The 36 Olympics really cemented the idea of lifts. They had a tram there for the skiers. So the skiers saw the real benefit of being able to ride up and ski down. And you get in so many more vertical feet. In fact, there's a quote here from the British well-known skier said that to achieve the standard of a major winner, you need weeks of practice where you have at least 10 to 15,000 feet of vertical a day. Any skier has to climb is lucky to average 4,000 to 5,000 feet. So that's why we were at such a disadvantage compared to the European skiers. Sun Valley Resort was opened in December 36, and they had the world's first chairlift. It was invented by Union Pacific engineers as an innovative way to get people up the hill. And a huge number of Seattle skiers went to the Sun Valley. And my God, they could ride up, 2,000 feet in a matter of minutes and ski down. It was wonderful. And the Seattle Times said, skiers are not made by climbing hills. They develop proficiency by coming downhill. If you ski at Rainier, you get in about 4,000 vertical a day. At Sun Valley, you get 37,000 vertical a day. He also said Sun Valley is 26 hours by train and 20 hours by car, but it might as well be in Seattle's backyard. There's so many Seattle people that ski there. These are 2 of Sun Valley's original lifts. The one on the left is Proctor Mountain. It's no longer skied. That's Dollar Mountain. Most of the skiing takes place here in Baldy now. That was opened for general skiing in 1940. But everyone wanted to chairlift after this one. And so you start getting pressure here. In 1937, a private company was formed, Ski Lifts Inc., and they put in 3 rope tows, one at Rainier, one at Baker, and one at Snoqualmie Summit. And they pitched it saying, you increase the safety, you eliminate collisions between skiers going up and coming down. Proficiency, Eastern skiers learn so much better and faster, we can't compete without these. And enjoyment and advancing. 5 times the skiing as possible with toes, and skiers arrive at the top fresh for downhill runs. So they put in 3 revolutionized local skiing. This is actually their plan for Snoqualmie Summit. We saw that first picture, and this was the limit of the ski area. They proposed to increase the skiable area and put the rope tow up the side, which they did. These are some quotes, I won't go over them, but who here used to ride rope tows, right? Challenge, not much fun. Warren Miller, Otto Lang, Joy Lucas, they all talked about how difficult it was, the challenges. Skier has to grab icy, wet, slippery ropes and race through a gloved hand until friction tightened the hole, and you ended up exhausted. And if you're a woman, small woman, it would raise you up in the air unless you rode right behind a bigger guy. But Otto Lang said, as primitive as this was, it was still preferable to laboriously climbing the hill. This is the first rope tow at Snoqualmie. This is when it was still operated by Seattle Ski Park. This says rope tow here. And you can see the kind of crowds that would come up there on the weekend. This is probably winter of '38. This is the actual first tow. It's called Old Betsy. And here's the tow shack. This is Webb Moffett, who was hired by Ski Lifts Inc. in '38 to run the tows. And in '40, he took over the company and operated. He and his family operated Snoqualmie Pass skiers till 1997. Single ride cost 10 cents, and an all-day pass cost $1. So that brought it within the realm of most people. Immediately successful. At the end, some 3,000 people were taking the lifts and averaging 50 to 70 rides a day, as opposed to maybe a half a dozen if you had to climb up and ski down. And 20,000 people were attracted to the ski park because of that in '38. And remember, in '34, there were 2,000 to 4,000 going every weekend. So you can see how skiing is becoming more and more popular. And the ski industry was a $3 million business then, so things were really coming together. There were a half dozen outstanding ski areas within 4 hours of the city. And every weekend, 20,000 skiers were found throughout the state skiing. Then, also in '38, the Milwaukee Ski Bowl opened. Now, all the railroads in the country were influenced by Sun Valley, opened by Union Pacific. This was a huge success. The amount of passengers attracted to Sun Valley were astronomical. They brought in huge new revenue, and they made skiing exciting and sexy. So the Milwaukee Railroad said, we're going to get a piece of the action. So in '38, they opened the Ski Bowl at Hyak. And Hyak is the eastern portal of their tunnel under Snoqualmie Pass. And it's actually a little east of where the present Hyak ski area is. But they had a modern ski lodge. It was accessible by 2 hours by train from Seattle, a little more from Tacoma. They had what was called a J-bar lift. It's like a T-bar, except the loop goes under your legs. And they had free ski lessons for high school students. So this really dramatically changed skiing in the whole state. This was the first modern ski area, and it brought a huge number of new people in. Again, if you're in high school, you got free ski lessons. What a deal is that? They actually, we'll see, they actually built a huge ski lift too, and from 40 on, it was a site of many large competitions. This is where it is. This is I-90 here. There's the summit. This is what used to be ski acres, and this is what in '59 was opened as Hyak. The ski bowl is right here because that's the end of the tunnel, so that's where it came, and that's where it was located. Here you can just see there. This is the poster for their opening. Ken Syverson ran the ski lessons, $1.70 round trip, state-of-the-art modern lodge, and it's the best thing that came along. Next year, they doubled the lodge in size, and this is actually the J-bar that went up there. Again, it's easier than riding a rope tow, and a lot easier than hiking up. Scenes on the ski train. This is skiers getting off, but they had a boxcar that was open for dancing. And that was one of the big attractions, particularly for the high school students. You danced up and you danced back. And there were a lot of romances that were formed, apparently, in the dancing area. They had another baggage car with waxing tables, so you could actually wax your skis on the way up. And there's some quotes there. The dance hall, it's a place where fellow skiers can become acquainted. You not only have fun learning to ski, but you have fun in the train too. The Big Apple is an excellent way of limbering up for skiing. Infectious swing time, dancing, and singing aboard the train set the tempo for the day. And one of the things that's interesting when you look at the newspapers, this was such a big deal when the Ski Bowl opened, is that all the department stores, all the sporting goods stores had huge ads in the paper for ski gear. And you know, many of them expanded in the ski business because there were so many new skiers. And as you can see, Best Apparel advertised ski train slippers for dancing on the way home. And the ads really emphasized the safety. The PTA endorsed this because parents were worried about their kids going up by car. So they really emphasized the safety of this. Let the engineer do the driving. And 12,000 skied at the Ski Bowl in 38. This is how they advertised the ski lessons. They taught controlled skiing, not pell-mell, center-of-the-road wing digging, but how to turn, how to control, and how to catch the joy of skiing. And Dick Durrance, the famous ski racer from 36, visited, said, "There's nothing like this in the East. There's nothing like it in Europe." And he lived in Europe for 5 years before he went to college. Not even in Germany, and I thought they developed mass organization for their skiers. So again, this really helped to put Washington skiing even further on the national map. This is how I got into it. This is my mother. 1938. She was taught at Queen Anne High School. Because she skied, she became the advisor of the ski club. And she was young and single, so the reporters loved to interview her. I've got half a dozen pictures like this. Went into Times, and these are the 38 state-of-the-art ski togs. You can't really see it, but that's a University of Washington crew Letterman sweater. And we were puzzled by that and the genesis, because guys didn't lightly give away their Letterman sweater. And we found out later, after she died, she was actually engaged to one of the members of the 36 crew, the boys in the boat. 39, they put in a giant ski lift. The National Four-Way Championships were held here in 1940. This was put in for the jumping events, and it was one of the biggest in the world, and was used for major competitions for the next decade. The jumping event, and you can see a jumper going down toward the lodge, was watched by 8,000 people. A very famous Norwegian jumper, Torger Torple, won it, but another Norwegian, Alf Engen, won the combined title. One of our local skiers came in third, which was terrific for local skiing. He really became a local hero, but he was tragically killed in 1940 on a Silver Skis race. I mentioned Northern Pacific's interest in getting in the game. This is what they proposed. Stampede Pass, one of the finest ski grounds in America. They're going to put in probably a tram and designed a large facility for 200 to 300 skiers. They decided to start out small, so they built this ski lodge and operated as the Martin Ski Dome for a couple of years. Again, access was by train from Seattle or Tacoma. And they decided with the war coming up, they wouldn't expand it. And they sold this to the University of Washington after the war. They used it as the main site for ski activities. I talked about the interest in distance records. Again, these were followed all over the world whenever new distance records were set. And in 1941, 2 records were set in the Northwest within 3 weeks of each other. The one who won the 40 jumping competition, Cle from New York, the human skyrocket, set a new tournament in distance record at the Leavenworth tournament in February 41, 273 feet, huge publicity all over the country and the world. 3 weeks later, in March, he broke his own record and jumped 285 feet at the Milwaukee Ski Bowl. Said if the takeoff was moved back 30 feet, he could jump 300 feet. And 20,000 people skied at the Ski Bowl in 42. Skiing generally closed down during World War II because of the demands of the war. The only exception was at Snoqualmie Pass. That was kept open, and Webb Moffett said he made more money in the war than he did beforehand because people had gas ration tickets, and all the ardent skiers would combine theirs and drive up to the pass, and no place else was open. So he literally made far more money during the war than he had earlier. This is quadrupled the first year. Early 40s, the volunteer ski patrol were started. 38, the National Ski Patrol Association started in the East, and a bunch of those homeowners whose cabins I showed you before on Snoqualmie Pass formed snow owls, and they became the people that offered the ski patrol services at the pass. During the war, not many people know this, the Army ski troops, mountain troops they prefer to be called, trained for 2 years on Mount Rainier before they moved to Camp Hale. They started in November of 40, and they were very successful. Then it was a small operation led by John Woodard, who was the local ski hero. And in 42, they decided they needed to expand the number of ski troops to 15,000, a full division, and they didn't have room to teach them at Rainier, so they moved to Camp Hale, and that's where they became best known. The local skiers, the mountain troops were allowed to compete in the local races, and of course they were the best skiers in the country, the people that taught at Sun Valley and elsewhere. So they dominated the local racing scene. One of the things that my old ski club did, Sahale, is that there's an organized program to bring military personnel to the mountains to teach them how to ski during the winter. And so they would bring 50 to 100 soldiers and sailors from the Seattle area by truck up to Snoqualmie Pass and teach them how to ski. And most of these guys were from the Midwest or South and never seen either snow or ski before. After the war, there was a huge pent-up demand. Every place expanded, new ski areas were open. Snoqualmie Summit tripled in size the first year or two. They put in 8 rope tows where they had just 2 before. And as I said, the University of Washington bought from Northern Pacific the Martin Ski Dome. They put in a rope tow. And they actually had ski races there, intercollegiate ski races, as well as the Husky Winter Sports Club. The Milwaukee Ski Bowl didn't open up to 47. They hugely expanded it. They tripled it in size. They had 4 new rope tows and a new style tow called a ski boggin. It was basically a sled that was pulled uphill by cables, and it went around like this. So one car went up while the other one went down. It's very high capacity. Could carry 400 skiers an hour. So compared to even a single chairlift like that at Sun Valley, this was a high capacity lift and very successful. In 47, they did the tryouts for the Olympic jumping team for the 48 Olympics at the Milwaukee Ski Bowl. And there's local races for the Alpine team that culminated in a competition at Sun Valley. For the Alpine team, all the teams trained at Sun Valley in 47 and 48. And we had 3 local skiers on the Alpine team: Gretchen Fraser, Dave Ferries, and Don Emick. Ski Bowl increased in size, put in more lifts. They had 8 rope tows. They had the National Jumping Championships there in '48, and another distance record was set there. The big story of '48 in the Olympics was Gretchen Fraser from Tacoma. She won the first Alpine medals in the Olympics. She won both the silver and gold and was the darling of the Olympics. And well known, Gretchen Gold on Seattle Ridge in Sun Valley is named after her. And she became probably our most famous local skier. '49, they were really expanding the Milwaukee Bowl. They wanted to make it one of the best in the country. They were blasting and taking out trees. And the other thing that happened in '49 was ski acres opened with the first chairlift. But then, December '49, tragedy struck. The lodge at the Milwaukee Ski Bowl and the train depot burned down. It's a $180,000 fire. They kept it open for skiing using railroad cars on sidings, but Milwaukee Road decided not to reopen next year because of the demands of the Korean War, and they announced they'd lost money every year in the operations. And ski jumping continued elsewhere, but this was really the demise of the major focus of both ski jumping and alpine skiing. And it took a decade and a half before alpine skiing recovered from this. This was really the dynamic center, the modern center of alpine skiing, and it was gone by 1950. And it really wasn't until the 60s that some of the other local areas, Stevens expanded, Mission Ridge, Crystal, they opened up, and it took a long time. So the 50s were really kind of a lost decade in many ways in skiing. Jumping did continue till '78 at Leavenworth. They had 5 national championships there, and 3 distance records were set in 5 years in the 60s. This is kind of the end of the formal presentation. A little bit of a downside. It shows, the first paragraph shows the growth in skiing from 2,000 to 4,000 people in '33 to between 2011 and 14, there was an average of 2.1 million visitors to ski resorts a year. 2013, it was a $951 million industry in the state. Grew to gigantic proportions. But it's in danger because of climate change. Skiing, these are quotes from a couple of different reports that have been done. Skiing faces an uncertain future because of climate change. In the last decade, 272 skiers have closed in the country because of unreliable snow conditions. By 2025, snow conditions that exist at 6,000 feet will rise to 7,000 feet. Snowmaking, now at 88% of our ski areas, will have to become much more extensive. Areas will have to stockpile snow for later use. A 2-degree centigrade temperature change means that ski resorts will have 32 fewer days per season for snowmaking at 7,400 feet. Some computer models predict that by 2050, Pacific Northwest will receive 40 to 70% less snow. Resorts will have to reconfigure operations to get skiers higher in the mountain and get them down to the bottom, perhaps using plastic grass. Nationally, winter sports is a $66 billion industry, and the quote is, a surprisingly large sector of the U.S. economy appears to be teetering on the brink. So, in spite of all the fun and games, we have a disturbing future to look at. Now, if you're interested, I put in a special selection about the Ellensburg Ski Club. Ellensburg. Has anyone heard of the Ellensburg Ski Club?
Yep.
Have you? Most of the information I got came from the Seattle Times, and there's a book called A Ski Race by Sam Worthington. Sarah, there are a few things in the local newspapers here, but I haven't extensively reviewed the local newspapers. But apparently it took place in 20s. There were reports in the Cle Elum newspapers that there'd be spring ski festivals up at Martin. Everyone would ride from Ellensburg and Cle Elum and also Yakima and Tacoma to Martin at Stampede Pass. And that became an annual thing that local skiers participated in. And in 1926, it said a big delegation came to that from Ellensburg. The ski club here formed in 1931 with a ski area in Robinson Canyon, which is 8 miles out of town apparently. And they advertised it to make people around here see there's some fun out in the snow and skis and toboggans. There's a good road open to 1/4 mile from the slide. It really focused on ski jumping, as was true elsewhere. And an open house was held in January 31 with a Class A jump, good for up to 175 feet, a B jump, rocky run, boys gliding under 15, ladies gliding, and a toboggan race with suitable prizes in each event. Here are a bit of memorabilia. This came from 32. That was actually the pass you had to buy. 25 cents. And in 32, under the direction of Carl Solberg, who was a local skier here, and one of the newspapers that I have here said he was the world champion skier for 1914. And I'm not sure what that means. There was really no world championship. He's probably from Norway and probably won the national jumping championship. That's likely what it meant. They held tournaments in 33, 34, and 35. 36 jumpers competed in 1934 on a greatly improved hill, and hundreds of spectators watched from their cars because it was not good weather. 35, there was a new jump that was built that would allow jumps to up to 300 feet. And after that, up through at least 38, I found indications that Ellensburg Ski Club members would compete with other ski clubs in downhill and alpine skiing. And the club reportedly operated a portable rope tow at the old Blue Pass in 1939. And here's some pictures that I got from Central. Just some random pictures, undoubtedly from Robinson Canyon. This first one you can actually see 2 of the jump sites. And Central has no information about these pictures, who they are, or even when they took place or where. But people were clearly having fun, and noticed that there are women ski jumpers too. Ski jumping wasn't just limited to men in those days. Telemark turn and landing was important. There's one here. Here, she's skiing with a dog. I love that. Her dog's racing ahead of her and wins the race. So that's all I have. Questions, comments, thoughts? By the way, if anyone has information about the Ellensburg Ski Club, I'd love to find out more about it. Like I said, I just found random things in the Seattle Times, but I'm not aware that anyone's done a paper or any research, but it'd be a great project for someone to do at some point. Any questions? Yeah.
Do you know where in Robinson Canyon that was at?
I don't. I only located Robinson Canyon on Google Maps,
Okay.
but it said it was a 1/4 mile from the end of the road, whatever that means. And that was 1931, so
Okay.
where the road ended then
Yeah.
compared to now, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did Alpental come to be? And it's interesting because it's
67.
so much more advanced than anything else up there.
Right.
What was the origin of that? Do you know?
1967, put together by Jim Griffin, Booth Gardner, and one other investor. And they realized that had by far the most challenging skiing on the Snoqualmie Pass. So it took them about 4 years to put it together. It opened winter of '67 and was operated independently. The Moffett family bought it, I think, in the late '80s. That was the last of the 4 that they bought. And after that, they owned and operated all 4 ski areas on Snoqualmie Pass. And they sold in '97 to Booth Company, which is a national group that operates ski areas all around. My friend Dave Moffett, who was operating the company then, saw the handwriting on the wall about climate change and believed they had to get out while the getting was good, and they got a fair price, as he said, for the ski areas. And as that last slide shows, Snoqualmie Pass is probably the most endangered of most ski areas in terms of climate change. 3,000 feet is nothing. Yeah.
I was just going to offer something that you didn't mention on there, but it was an interesting piece of history that we have. I'm on the patrol up at Hyak, and we have a couple of very, very old patrollers up there who go back to probably the late 50s. And one of the things that I found most interesting is they didn't have groomers back when they first started, and the patrol used to hike up in the morning and side slip the hill to groom it. So. Yeah, I mean, I'm noticing on a lot of your pictures that there's not much grooming.
There's no grooming. That didn't really come into the 80s. Well, even more than that, Webb Moffett had a deal. If you showed up at 8 o'clock and boot packed the hill for an hour, you would get a free pass. And that's how I and many of my friends skied, because we didn't have any money. And for an hour, I mean, it's hard work. You literally had to go up and down. Sometimes you could get in a line and snowplow down together, and that would do it, but most of it was boot packing. But, for a free lift ticket, we're 14 years old, that sounded like a good deal to us. Yeah.
You mentioned Stampede Pass. Isn't there a ski club that operates out of Cabin Creek? And I'm just wondering how that plays into
Okay, well, the Mountaineers still have their mini ski hut at Stampede Pass. The Kongsberger Ski Club, formed in 1952 by ski jumpers from Norway that left the Seattle Ski Club, because the Seattle Ski Club, after World War II, lost interest in jumping. And they formed the Kongsberger Ski Club, because most of them were from Kongsberg, Norway. They built a small cabin and a jump at Cabin Creek, and it's still going. They haven't done any jumping since really the 80s. It's been mainly a cross-country facility. And about a month ago, I gave a talk at Third Place Books in Seattle, and there were half a dozen people from Kongsberger Ski Club, so I know it's still going. The Kongsbergers were very active. They tried desperately to keep the ski jumping tradition going. They were instrumental in not only giving lessons, but they were officials at many of the international ski competitions. Olaf Ullin was the head of the ski jumping in the '56 Olympics, and the Kongsbergers ran the ski jumping in the '60 Olympics at Squaw Valley. So they tried to keep up the tradition, but it was an aging group of Norwegian immigrants. The next generation never really took to it. And the ski jumping all over pretty much ended in the '70s. The National Ski Association stopped funding ski jumping in the early '70s. They used to fund both Alpine and ski jumping, and they pulled their subsidies. So that was really the beginning of the end. In the '60s, almost all the West Coast and mountain colleges had jumping as one of the sports in the ski teams, and that hasn't existed since the late '60s. Yeah.
What year did you first ski in Sun Valley?
1960. My friends and I took the train over. We weren't old enough to drive. And people think taking the train was romantic. I think that's the worst trip I've ever taken. It took us 24 hours from Seattle. We left Seattle Union Station at 10 o'clock at night. 2 o'clock, we were in Portland, had to get off. And at 4 o'clock, the eastbound train, the Portland Roads, left. And then at 10 o'clock the next night, we got off in Shoshone, Idaho, where we went across the street and actually went to one of my old family hotels. My great-grandfather built the Fall Hotel across the Shoshone train station in 1900, and that's where we waited for the buses to take us into Sun Valley. But of course, we kids, we were sitting up the whole time, never sleeping, so that was a long and comfortable trip, believe me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did that train trip to Sun Valley the first time in 1852.
Okay.
And it was a very nice, very pleasant overnight
Did you
bit
ever
on the
sleep?
train, and then came into Shoshone in the morning,
Yeah.
and they picked us up from the valley there in buses and drove
Yeah.
up to the,
Did you have a sleeper?
yeah, it was in a sleeper.
Well,
Yeah.
you came from a different level of affluence than I did. We had to sit up the whole 24 hours. Believe me, that makes a different trip.
And the lift on Bali was a single chair.
Oh, yeah, yep. They actually had double chairs for most of Baldy in 60, except from the roundhouse up the top. They had a
Yeah.
double, but they still had one over there.
I skied at the Milwaukee Ski Bowl too before the lodge burnt down.
Okay, take the train up and,
Yeah, and Washington Athletic Club
oh, yeah,
group of the club.
right. That was one other thing I didn't mention about Ellensburg. You could only get to the Milwaukee Ski Bowl by train. They didn't allow access by car. And there were special ski trains from Tacoma and Seattle, so you couldn't get in there from Ellensburg.
Interesting.
But in 1940, a bus company started running buses. They got special permission to run buses in there. So from 1940 on, you could go by bus from Ellensburg to the Milwaukee Ski Bowl.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Were there ever any rope tows up in Cle Elum, or just the ski jumps?
They were just the ski jumps. However, in '34, John Bresco tried to put together a much broader ski area right outside of Cle Elum by Bullfrog Pond. He got a $10,000 grant from the federal government, and Northern Pacific expressed interest in running it and putting in a train. But that fell through because of the problems in the economic problems and depression.
A tram.
Train of sorts. So, the museum has my book for sale. All the profits go to the ski museum. If you want to buy copies, I'd be happy to autograph them for you. And if you buy them, it helps support a good cause.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much. She did.